Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks.
Hello, hi.
Hi, lovely to see you, Juliet. Hi, Sinead. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. So I am delighted to be joined here by Tom. Tom is the Chief AI Officer of General Purpose, and General Purpose is the UK's leading AI training school, and he has helped thousands of people get value from AI in their work. And he has a very great career. He previously worked in startups including Meta, the Government Digital Service, and BBC Worldwide. So thank you for joining us.
Well-known startups there.
Yes, well, some startups and those ones.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me, and it's such a pleasure to do this, because we've been working together for some time, because you're actually helping us to complete our B Corp certification, which has been a kind of a fantastic process. So thank you for that. But when we were discussing stuff, we were like, oh, actually, I think there's like a really interesting opportunity for us to have a discussion between us around AI and ethics more broadly. And so I'm really pleased that we were able to find time to do it. So
Yeah.
I'm really pleased that so many people have turned up to listen to us talk as well. It's very appreciated. So thank you to all of you for coming.
Amazing. So as Tom said, I have a sustainability consultancy. We help businesses with sustainability reporting and communications, and I cannot get through the day without someone asking me about the ethics of AI. And everyone seems really, really concerned, whether it's AI is going to take our jobs from an economic perspective, or the environmental considerations. There's all these like crazy stats of like, I don't know if they are crazy, Tom will tell us, but the stats around, if you use ChatGPT, a search is kind of 10 to 20 times more energy consumption than using a Google search, or it's the same as boiling a kettle. So everyone seems really, really concerned around it. So we are here to grill Tom, the expert, on what we should be doing and how we can kind of make changes. So firstly, Tom, give us the lowdown. Maybe let's start on the the main fears that people have, and which ones are founded and which ones aren't.
Oh, I mean, there are a million fears that people have, and they all kind of tend to mix together into a messy blur. You've got everything from the AI is going to become sentient, Skynet will happen, AI is going to wipe us out, through to the kind of more prosaic, what happens if LinkedIn is full of AI generated slop and we can't find any kind of decent human written content in there. And they're on a spectrum of how likely they are to kind of how kind of impactful they're going to be. Like, clearly, if Skynet happens, that's a real problem. But there's very little to suggest in the way that this technology works today that that's the kind of the problem we're facing. I think that in terms of the kind of like most extreme end of negative things that could go wrong with AI, the one that keeps people in industry awake much more is, what if AI tools are making all sorts of forms of work easier? What if it makes it easier to become like a bioterrorist or something? And that's kind of where the realistic kind of extreme level of fears live, rather than the AI itself is going to kind of become sentient and take over the world. I mean, I think it's a kind of a very interesting thing, though, because I don't know if we've got time for a very slight digression, but
Go for it.
Humans have been talking about artificial intelligence and artificial life for pretty much as long as human culture existed. The kind of very first example of artificial intelligence is the giant bronze automaton Talos, which is a ancient Greek myth and dates back at least 4, maybe 5,000 years. So we've been talking about this idea of kind of artificial life being created and then going rogue for a very long time. But unfortunately, because of these stories, tend to conflate artificial life, which is something that has its own kind of wants and needs and sense of agency, against artificial intelligence, which is what we talk about in a kind of technical sense, which is being able to learn from patterns in data. And that's really what we mean in a technical sense when we talk about AI, is that we are showing it a load of data and then letting it figure out the patterns within that for itself. That's the kind of key distinction of an AI system, but that's just statistics. And large language models, the kind of technology that powers things like ChatGPT, work in exactly the same way as the predictive text on your phone. The only thing that's different is that they are trained on 1 million times more data, and so they're much, much more accurate. And when they get really, really accurate at predicting the next word, they actually can do quite a good job of representing human thinking, because humans have written lots of documents that represent human thinking, and then AI is kind of capable of mimicking that. But that doesn't mean that it's in any way the same as a human in terms of having a inner life and, you know, all the other things that kind of humans have that we would associate with being alive. And I think, sorry.
Do you think there's a chance we're going to start over relying on it though? Like, I feel like I use it all the time, and I'm dyslexic. So from a kind of writing perspective, it helps me so much. Do you think we're just going to become lazy? Like the way I used to remember everyone's telephone numbers, I don't remember anyone's now, right? No one knows the telephone number apart from your own off by heart. Is that, right? You think we're going to get stupider as AI gets more intelligent?
So I'm going to answer that first, and then I want to come back to the kind of neurodiversity angle in a second, because I also have learning needs, and you know, I there's a really interesting discussion to have around there. So what was it going to say? I think if you had kind of gone back into, well, I mean, actually, like a really kind of obvious example, people used to say our calculator's going to make us stupid. Like when the kind of the hand calculator came out originally, you know, there was a lot of concern. Was it going to make us stupid? And this has always been a kind of a thing in technology, and there's very little evidence to suggest that it's true. It turns out that human intelligence is much, much more flexible than we could ever have supposed. And as humans have kind of found technologies to replace like difficult tasks, like, you know, working out long division by hand or whatever, you know, we've then taken that to the next stage, which is rather than just doing a few small sums, now we're able to model like the entire motion of the planets in order to decide where we're going to send our rockets or whatever. Like, you know, it's one thing that I love about humanity is kind of our insatiable curiosity, that for us, like, nothing is ever going to be enough. And that if we find a tool that makes one thing easier, we're just going to go straight on to the next thing. And actually, that is one of the key distinctions between artificial intelligence and artificial life, is that kind of idea of always being unsatisfied and needing to go on to the next thing. AI is not satisfied one way or another because it doesn't have wants and needs.
But you did reference slop earlier, which is basically just the kind of rubbish that we get sucked into on social media, you know, where you're just scrolling and watching. Like, it's so interesting. Like the slop now with AI is like fascinating, right? Because it really like captures you, but you're wasting time and energy watching this slop. And because I lived in China for a while, I bet they don't have the same level of slop over there as we have over here.
I mean, I can't speak to China specifically, but I think we have to be really careful about this. Actually, we could talk about this in the kind of neurodivergent sense as well. That what you and I might consider as slop could be incredibly empowering for people who previously were shut out from posting on LinkedIn because they didn't know how to articulate something at all. And, you know, it's a very similar argument to social media. And, you know, there's a lot of concerns, and there are still a lot of concerns about, we've kind of displaced the traditional media, which had its kind of editors and its professional journalists and whatever, with everyone being able to be a content creator. And that has, you know, broadly democratized the ability to get your personal viewpoint and message out. And, you know, that has had some potentially very negative impacts on society and potentially some very positive impacts. And the technology itself is almost kind of value neutral, and it's more about how humans use it. And that's not to defend AI slop. Like, I don't think it's great if people are using ChatGPT or whatever to automatically post on LinkedIn on their behalf. You know, I don't think that necessarily adds much value. But I think that used in the right way, where it's helping you to refine stuff. I mean, something that I do the whole time is I'll think of a LinkedIn post and then I'll put it into Claude to get some feedback about how could I make this a better post that's more valuable for my audience. That's actually a really big kind of quality improvement. And I think that too much of the like negativity around AI is based on the assumption that the status quo that we have is already pretty good. And it might be pretty good for some people, but that does not mean that it's pretty good for everyone. And in that world, if we are empowering those people predominantly, that can't really be a bad thing, in my opinion.
So in your view, AI isn't really going to make us kind of more stupid. We're going to adapt. We're going to work together. We're going to become kind of more intelligent together, would you say?
I think it's highly unlikely that AI is going to make us more stupid. I think that if anything, AI is probably going to be a net benefit in terms of making us more intelligent. AI is fundamentally a creative technology. It might be making the act of creation easier, but it is fundamentally about creating stuff. It requires a human to write that initial prompt.
Okay.
That is very, very different from the kind of consumptive technologies of scrolling through TikTok or whatever. And I don't know about you, but I would rather that we lived in a world where technology was primarily facilitating creation than one where it's primarily facilitating consumption.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm not an anthropologist, so you know, we're all on this journey together.
And the next kind of big question that everyone comes up to me is, AI is going to impact jobs. AI is going to take my job. And that feels like it's happening. My friend,
it is happening.
You don't need developers in the same way. Everyone's kind of like SEO companies are totally pivoting. So there is that real moment where AI is taking our jobs. What's your take on this?
I mean, it is happening, particularly at the junior end. You already see in the stats that graduate intake roles are going down. We also see that a lot in the firms that we talk to. And I think, interestingly, there was a report probably about 6 weeks ago that said, oh, AI hasn't really had a impact in the jobs market yet. And I'm involved in this kind of group that's around that, and they're like, yeah, it means that there's like nothing really to be concerned about. And I was like, I think you forget how slowly most companies work. Like most companies that we talk to are like in the kind of dabbling phase, or maybe in the early operational stage. They're using kind of ChatGPT or whatever for kind of some basic tasks across the organization. But the number of organizations who are like really using AI so productively that it's starting to displace roles can probably be counted on like two hands. Like, it's like it's really, really small. But that doesn't mean that it isn't happening and it isn't starting to happen. And a lot of organizations that we talk to, they're not thinking about this year's hiring plans, which were already baked in last year. They're thinking about what do our intake plans look like for next year. And in a world where even if there's only a 1% chance that AI is going to disrupt your business model, which for a lot of firms, it could actually meaningfully disrupt their business model, and they might make less money, they might make more money, but often they don't know. There's a great uncertainty. And in a world where there is a great uncertainty, it actually does make sense to moderate your hiring decisions somewhat, because it's a lot easier to hire than to let people go. And so I think that this impact is going to start showing up much more strongly next year. And you can kind of see in the canary in the coal mine is software engineering, where if you were to look at a chart between 2010 and 2020 of open junior software engineering positions, so basically jobs for recent graduates of computer science degrees, you would see that the chart would go up exponentially. And then in 2021, it just drops off a cliff, because every software company realizes, hey, these junior tasks, which in software engineering, I used to be a software engineer for a bit. A first year, like out of university software engineer, is probably a net drag on the organization. If by the end of the first year they are productively adding value to the firm, that like you've done relatively well. And actually, entry-level software engineering positions really reflect that. You know, in most software engineers, when they first come out of university, are earning like less than half of what they could earn it in year 2, because it takes that long to bake in. But what AI has done is it's moved that. So probably you have to get to like year 3 or 4 before you can start to return value to the organization. And there are a lot of firms that say, why don't we just like, you know, forget about that and just go straight to the next step, and not actually hire any entry level roles anymore. And I think that I would expect that trend to be mirrored across basically most knowledge work over the next few years.
And you had mentioned something called like an AI offset, which is
Yeah.
like balancing job displacement with positive contributions, which I thought was really, really interesting.
Yeah, so it's something that we've been kind of thinking about and working on kind of internally, where, you know, we've been kind of doing it in consultation with some of our bigger clients, where they're interested in how they kind of mitigate the impact of AI. So we're basically looking at offsetting the AI energy usage, offsetting the impact on jobs, largely through upskilling people who are kind of recent graduates to make them more kind of job ready, to kind of get them over that hump. And what I find really interesting, an idea called creative offsetting, where putting part of your AI budget against funding some kind of like arts or whatever program as a way of kind of ensuring that there is space for humans still to kind of create and explore. And I think that there is a really interesting standard and opportunity to kind of be created there, that mitigates a lot of the worst impacts of AI.
And we'll get onto AI policies in a little bit. But before we do that, I feel like we've discussed kind of the social impacts, the big fears around the societal aspects of AI. Let's talk about the environmental aspects. I find it really interesting that people seem to care so much when it comes to using AI. Like suddenly loads of people who don't seem to care about the energy consumption, or they drive a petrol car, you know, they don't care about fossil fuels, are suddenly coming to be really concerned around AI and the environmental kind of implications, which I find fascinating from a human psychology perspective. But the real kind of main one is the servers, right? It feels like there's no cloud, there's just giant server farms somewhere in the world that are consuming all of this energy. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you that when we work with an organization, we will often we'll both go and survey the entire organization, and we'll also do some kind of one-on-one interviews to try to understand kind of where the kind of the organization is in terms of kind of psychologically around its kind of AI adoption. And energy usage is by far the thing that comes up the most. But the people who bring it up, when you kind of talk to them, it's not really, like you said, a kind of pure concern about the environmental impact. Actually, underneath that, it's almost always really a fear about their job, and or some other reason that they don't like AI. And energy usage is how they are kind of choosing to kind of try and like push back, because it's a socially acceptable way of pushing back. And you know, there is nothing wrong with people being concerned about the impacts of AI both on society and themselves, but just kind of complaining about the energy usage doesn't actually help us to fix whatever the problem is. And you know,
your energy usage on Netflix, you know.
yeah, exactly. So yes, that's like a really good example. Netflix is far more energy intensive than an AI model, and you know, a typical daily usage of ChatGPT is going to use around the same energy as it takes to make a latte. And most people in an office will quite happily drink a coffee, maybe several during a day, without even thinking about it. It's not that AI isn't energy intensive. It's just that there are lots of things in modern life that are energy intensive. And if AI is providing good economic value, there are ways to mitigate the harms. You know, something I kind of often say in the classes is that if you were really concerned about your environmental impact, taking one less transatlantic flight in your life would save more energy than you will likely ever use using AI. And sometimes people go, yeah, but the thing is, I want to be able to go on holiday. It's like, well, fine, but then understand that that's kind of where you're coming from on that.
But I do also work with a lot of people who don't fly, right?
Yeah.
So I work with people who choose not to fly, who have made that choice, who don't eat meat, who are those people who really, really care. What would you say to them about using AI? You know, it's like, if you don't use it, you're kind of getting left behind. Is there a way what's the most ethical and sustainable way they can use it?
Yeah. So everybody has to make their own ethical decisions about where they want to go. And it is a completely reasonable position to say, I am not going to use AI because I am concerned about the environmental impact or whatever. And that is completely fine. You know, and you accept you're going to get the kind of like the negative trade-offs of that, in the same way that if you don't fly, it means that you can't go on holiday to somewhere that's far away. Like, you know, that's fine. Everybody is welcome to kind of make their trade-offs in life. I tend to think that what I think will have a bigger impact than that is us collectively insisting that the AI companies do something around this. In fact, interestingly, this is one area where we are pushing on an open door compared to some of the stuff around like IP and whatever, which we could talk about in a bit, where the companies are very kind of opposed to doing
But
something.
surely because it's money, surely, right?
Yeah, but for them, they really want to reduce the energy usage, because at the end of the day, their biggest input cost is energy. And if they can reduce the energy usage, it makes them more profitable. And actually, most of their business models are predicated on the idea that they are going to make, that they are going to be able to make these models much more efficient. And when you think about the kind of algorithmic improvements that are already, you know, have been tested in kind of research and in academia and are kind of working their way through the pipeline, it is entirely reasonable to expect, you know, the energy usage to go down 10 times, maybe even 100 times over the next few years. Now, Jevons paradox would suggest that as the energy usage goes down and AI becomes cheaper, it will just be implemented more widely, so the overall impact will still end up being larger. But you know, I think that where we are today is not where we necessarily will end up, or even where anybody actually wants to end up. And I think that for people who are worried about the environmental impact of AI, their efforts are best placed into trying to make sure that their company does carbon offset their AI usage. Even more importantly, that their company selects AI models where the model creator is carbon offsetting or doing something specifically pro environment.
And for our smaller businesses here, what is an AI? Is there an AI tool that runs on renewable energy over fossil fuels or anything like that?
So I mean, this is kind of like a fascinating area, because it depends a little bit what you mean. You know, all of the kind of the key models that you would know are like, you know, ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot, you know, or Claude. Like, they have all committed to running their data farms or like on renewable energy. I think Google are the furthest along on this. The one that the kind of the real outlier there is Grok, the one that's run by X.AI, that's owned by Elon Musk. Like, they've taken a kind of a very different approach, where they basically will you know, train models using big gas turbines, and like they don't really have any kind of environmental or social commitment. So that's like one to kind of maybe like stay away from if you are kind of worried about the like the ethical kind of implications. You know, there's a bunch of ethical implications with that particular model. However, if Google and, you know, OpenAI or whoever buy up basically all the nuclear capacity in a country, you know, there's still other energy demands in society, and all that happens is that those energy demands get pushed onto somewhere else. So it's not as clear cut as like, oh, these companies are doing the good thing, therefore everything's fine. It's got to be like, are they going to add like new nuclear or new renewable or whatever, and that, like, that's where it all becomes a bit murkier. And I don't know that there is like a really clear like leader table or whatever, but perhaps there should be around this to help people make a more informed decision.
So that we know. And what about like the heat of the servers? I remember as well, like thinking that there's like an opportunity to kind of use that heat in another way.
So this is something that kind of people get really interested in, is the water usage, and it's something that gets talked about a lot, because actually it could potentially in some cases be more of a problem, because some data farms use a lot of fresh water. It really depends though on where the data farm is situated. So for example, in the UK, almost all data centers are air cooled because our atmosphere is naturally cool. If you are building a data center in like Arizona, like the outside air temperature is too high to be able to vent the heat outside, so then you have to water cool. And so like it, one of the things the model creators will do is they will try to situate their data centers in places that are cheaper to do the cooling, because actually a large chunk of the energy usage of a data center is actually cooling. It's like half their energy usage is actually going on cooling, which is why they like to put them in like the Arctic Circle and stuff, because you get your cooling for free. But this is, even where you do end up using fresh water that you need to cool your system, there are kind of some very interesting experiments going on in the Nordics around district heating. They already have district heating networks, which is where you run hot water pipes under your road to houses, and that helps power people's heating systems. And if you can then plug that into your data center, because one of the great things with data center is that it might be heating up the water, but it's not doing anything else to it. So that water is still like clean, usable, whatever, that you can then use that to basically replace a large amount of people's domestic energy usage, most domestic energy usage goes on heating. And so at that point it becomes, okay, the AI data center is using a lot of energy, but it's just replacing energy that's used elsewhere, and therefore it's not really like a net increase. And so there are a lot of intelligent things that can be done with thoughtful planning and kind of effort from the model creators and society in general, but only if people take the time and effort to make it happen, because often this is going to be a bit more complicated and a bit more effortful than just doing the kind of the cheapest, easiest thing.
And that's kind of the circular economy in action as well, isn't it? Where you're thinking right at the beginning, how are we going to design this so that it's, the whole life cycle rather than just solving this one need. I was at a conference where they were honestly talking about sending servers into space. At the beginning, I thought it was a joke, but it actually wasn't. They were like, I really thought they were winding us up, but it was a very serious conversation. So they were talking about putting servers in space, because it will just
I personally think that is a horrible idea for many reasons. One, it is incredibly energy intensive to put anything into space. So the only things you ever want to put into space are things that have to be in space, and they cannot be anywhere else, because the amount of energy you're going to use putting it into space is far more than anything else to do with it. Secondly, on Earth, we have the magnetosphere, which protects us from cosmic rays. Once you start sticking your server farms in space, you don't get that advantage. And that will then mess up all your data, and you'll have your data centers going out the whole time. So I don't know, like maybe they've got some amazing kind of new way that they've come up with, but I think that is a highly unlikely thing. I would not be putting that on my list of things that we should be trying to do. It would be much more practical and useful to put your data centers on the bottom of the ocean. Again, get your cooling for free, and it's protected and it's relatively good. And in fact, there have been several studies where they have tried to do so, and actually the cooling and everything, the energy usage is much improved, but the maintenance costs go up massively, because trying to maintain a server farm that's on the bottom of the ocean is quite difficult. And you know, there is still a bunch of work to be done to figure that bit out first. But if they could figure that out, that would be a great solution, a much better thing in space.
The research I read as well, it doesn't seem to impact like the heat of the ocean too much or anything like that.
Well, I mean, you know, compared to the size of the ocean, like the amount of heat that a data center puts out is absolutely nothing. Like, you know.
So it's fine. And what about all these new policies that are coming in? So we've got the EU AI Act, and I know obviously the UK have new policy. What are the kind of main takeaways from those that we should know as business owners?
So the EU AI Act is the kind of like farthest reaching, kind of strictest bit of legislation. Although it's now causing a kind of a lot of controversy even within the EU. Some of the Act's authors have actually said that its implementation should be paused. Because they think that it's now overly onerous. Like when they wrote it.
So all the sustainability legislation that came out is now being rolling back as well.
Yeah. You know, I think that there are kind of like a whole bunch of different issues because it's such a wide ranging piece of legislation. And I think that the key thing to be aware of from a you know, a kind of company trying to implement point of view is that you have to have put in place the kind of processes and systems to make sure that AI does not make biased decisions about people. Like I mean, there are lots of places where you can fall afoul, but these are like the ones that, unless you are a big tech company, you are most likely to run across. And the typical example here is using AI somewhere in your recruitment process.
Okay.
Now, Bloomberg did a study last year or maybe even the year before now, where they took the exact same CV and all they did was change the name to sound stereotypically white, stereotypically Asian, stereotypically black. And then they put it through ChatGPT a bunch of times asking, should this person be invited to interview for a hypothetical role? And just changing the name alone changed how likely it was that ChatGPT would say, yes, you should invite this person. Because
so
AI,
if you had the white name, you kind of it was ordered.
Well, actually, they did it across this kind of a series of different roles, and depending on the different roles, affected. So you know, one of the roles they tested was software engineer, and actually it preferenced the Asian name. Like, you know, it's but the thing is that these systems, because they are trained on like 70% of the internet, they have kind of swept up all of the biases and lazy stereotypes that are out there on the internet. And if you don't work to mitigate them, that's what you're going to get as your first answer. And when you are implementing AI, a big part of what you need to kind of be doing as an organization is thinking, how do we make sure that we kind of spot these biased things and design? Because there are ways that you can use AI and HR. Like if you, for example, created a hiring rubric for the role and then put the CV through it and said, you know, does this CV match that? Or maybe you like strip the name off, you strip any identifying details off. Like, you know, there are lots of different ways that you can mitigate it. But if you don't know enough about how these systems work and about how they can be biased, and you just do the first thing which you kind of think of, which is put the CVs in and say, which of these should I invite to interview, that could potentially have you running afoul of the EU AI Act. And you know, one of the things that we always say to clients is one of the requirements of the EU AI Act is that people have to be trained, end users of systems. So even if you are just using ChatGPT or Copilot at work, you have to have had training, and not just some kind of like 15-minute like click through compliance video. Like you have to actually have to do practical exercises in how to use AI in your actual job. You have to know how to use AI in your own role and be evaluated as having done so. So either through an exam, or in our classes, we make them do a practical exercise where the instructors can then sign them off based on the kind of results of their practical exercise. But, you know, I think that there are a lot of organizations that don't realize that they're actually probably not compliant with the AI Act at the moment.
And sometimes, you know, people say to me, oh, well, I'm not using AI in my business. And I'm like, well, if you have a CRM system, you probably are now,
Yep.
right? It's kind of weaving through so many areas of.
And I think this is going to be one of the really interesting challenges that businesses are going to face. We've come across a few times now with clients where they have had a a contract from someone that's going to buy them that said like no AI usage, and it's like, well, what counts as AI usage? Because notionally, the spell check in Word runs on AI. Like, you know, the snippets that you get in Gmail run on AI. Like the video call we're having right now, compressed using AI. Like AI is absolutely everywhere in every bit of technology we use. And I think that this kind of very like old-fashioned mentality of we should like block any AI usage and say like no AI can be used anywhere. Like that ship sailed like 15 years ago. Like it's far too late for that. What we need to do is insist that AI is used appropriately, and and it is is perfectly reasonable to have in your contract. We want you to use AI appropriately. We don't want you to be using it to write the entire product and sending it to us without looking at it. Like, that's an entirely reasonable thing to request from a service provider. Like, but, to ask them not to use AI at all is ridiculous.
And do you think so? Every business needs to have an AI policy now, right?
Oh,
So
absolutely. Like if a business doesn't have an AI policy now, they're actually starting to fall behind. It is like very, very interesting to me though that in the UK at least, I have seen firms use lack of AI policy as an excuse for not getting on with stuff for like 18 months. And when I think about this,
we don't have an AI policy, so we're
yeah,
not.
but like
engaged.
compared to kind of like our US clients, when ChatGPT came out, the default response of the US companies was, let's give everyone a license, see how they use it. We'll formulate a policy based on what they do. In the UK, I saw company after company. I mean, literally of all sizes, being like, "Oh, well, we haven't given anyone a license yet because we're still figuring out our AI policy." And a big part of my job is that they will send me these policies and say, what do you think? And there'll be like 50 pages. I'll be like, no one is going to read this. Like, no one is going to adhere to it because there's no way that they can. Like, your AI policy, as much as it exists, needs to be like 10 points on a single sheet of A4 that notionally you could print out and put on the wall if you need to.
And
like,
so what are those like acceptable user guidelines?
right.
Human oversight, these types of things.
Yeah, exactly. Like, like keep human in the loop, like make sure that you have checked every kind of process for bias, that you have some formal kind of red teaming in process in place, that you build up a team of kind of internal champions who are able to support the rest of the organization and explore use cases where there may be like, one of the worst things that we see happening in firms, which is what happens if they don't engage with AI, is that there are going to be early adopters in every organization, and you get some kind of like bright young thing that will be using some like third-party AI, like something. And I came across one the other day where like quite a large company actually, and they've got a new head of HR, and he was very, very proudly showing me this dashboard he had built in Lovable, which is a vibe coding app, that basically ingested all of their kind of people data, and stuck it, and then like represented kind of different like aspects of their kind of people thing. And I was like, did you talk to your IT team about this? He's like, no. And I was like, because that like all that data is PII, and like this is a personal Lovable account. I was like, are you at least like paying for it? No, I'm using the free account. So basically what you've done is you've taken all of your employee PII, put it into a model that is then being used to train future versions of the model on a server in the US. That, like, you know, like there's just like the kind of like this like expanding like explosion of problems. And I was like, don't do anything else. Go and talk to your IT team right now. And it just, this is what happens if firms don't engage with AI properly, because you will get bright, enthusiastic people who are trying to do the right thing,
Totally.
but
That's
don't know how to do it safely.
right? You know, it's
Yeah.
like really like good intentions. There's a comment here from Simone saying, I see policy going the same way as internet policy. It's a seatbelt, not handcuffs. So you have to be able to like move forward, right? Otherwise.
Yeah. Good kind of saying. You know, we definitely, like, every firm should have an AI policy, but it should be like very kind of lightweight, like, you know, just kind of 10 points. We spend a lot of time helping firms to actually just write those based on, because they've got to be specific to your individual firm and how you work and what tech stack you're using and whatever. But you know, that's something that we do quite a lot of. And it's a like, that's quite an easy thing to do.
And so needed. And does the AI Act insist businesses have one?
Yeah, that you've got to have a policy as part of it. Yeah.
Oh wow, I didn't realize. I thought it was just you'd be left behind. But no, it's a legal requirement. And we touched earlier on neurodiversity.
Yeah, super interesting.
I'd love to hear your views on this, because for me, like, AI has been a total game changer.
Yeah, and I think that this is utterly fascinating to me. You know, a large part of our team would like self-describe as neurodiverse, and I think amongst the kind of people who are AI early adopters, there is a very, very strong overrepresentation of people that are neurodiverse, and I think that is because if you are neurodiverse, often you have felt kind of slightly held back by your brain in all sorts of different situations. And AI actually does a really good job of fixing that. I am dyspraxic, for example, and I actually really struggle to write by hand. And when I was first given a laptop at school, it completely changed my life, because up until that point, the teachers all assumed I was stupid, because I couldn't like write an essay or whatever. I'd have to like rush, and it would like only be like half done, and when I was given a bit of technology that removed that barrier, and then suddenly I was as good as everyone else. And I think that AI is doing that for a lot of neurodiverse people, and that alone makes it a worthwhile technology, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting how universities are kind of adopting, not adopting. I lecture, and right at the beginning, they were kind of, students were kind of allowed to use it. Then it was a hard no, you cannot. And now it's kind of, they're trying to figure out ways of how they engage instead of cutting it off, to your point, to being a seatbelt, not handcuffs.
So I lecture at university as well, and I have to get like special dispensation for the students to be able to use AI in my class in their final project, because they're told everywhere else don't use it. But I always like to do this thing where at the start of the class I'm like, okay, now this is a safe space, so everybody close your eyes and then put your hand up if you've used AI to turn in an assessment for another class, and like literally 100% of them do. So I personally think that ship has sailed. And on my class, the way that we evaluate is they can use AI as much as they like in their final project and essay, but then we make them present it to us and we ask them questions about it, and it becomes really, really apparent whether they actually know what was in their own essay, and can talk kind of confidently and competently about it. And we will say, okay, so you've said this in your essay. Why did you say that? Like, how did you get to that? It's like and I think that is how kind of evaluation is going to become. But I think it also points to where like human knowledge as an input still going to be really valuable. It's not just in the output; it's in the why. And I think that humans are going to continue to be in the driving seat for the why of everything, maybe AI will help with the what, but like, and maybe the how as well, but the why is firmly human territory for the foreseeable future.
Amazing. So I feel like your view really to wrap up, from an ethical perspective with AI, the ship is sailing. We need to work with it to kind of make it as ethical as possible. Would that be
Yeah.
your position?
Yeah. I think that I think so much is already in motion that there's kind of no point in standing on the sideline and saying, "Hey, this doesn't work." However, within the AI labs and within the tech space, there is still a lot to play for in terms of how to make sure this technology is a net benefit. All of the AI labs are public benefit corporations. They all started with this kind of view, idealistic view, that AI was going to be a net benefit to society. And, you know, I believe that every company, every person wants to use technology in a way that is benefit for the world. And the more that we can kind of push on that open door, the more likely we are to end up with that, rather than, the biggest risk, in my opinion, is if we just have a small number of white middle-aged guys in Silicon Valley determining the future of AI, that we get something that looks perfectly good to them, but is actually like very problematic for the rest of the world.
And I think that's a lot of the world's problems just generally have kind of stemmed from that single point of thinking.
Yeah.
Through one lens, going into a country and saying, I know what's best for you. Actually, no, that's all kind of stakeholder engagement, right? It's absolutely key. It's the first step in sustainability. Amazing. So we have a few minutes. So I don't know if anyone has a question. They can either pop it in the chat or raise their hand, and we can answer them now. Otherwise, we can always get Tom's view at another time. So your big takeaways, Tom, are get an AI policy. That's a necessity.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid.
I think that, frankly, at this point, if you as an organization do not have everybody in the organization with a license to Copilot or ChatGPT or whatever, and an AI policy in place, you are actually like falling quite a long way behind. There are like that kind of process of turning that into something that is actually driving meaningful kind of productivity benefits. Like, lots of people are still on that journey, but if you haven't got those kind of like foundational pieces in place that allow you to even start the race, then you are actually falling behind at this point. And if you leave it much longer, it's probably going to be too late to catch up.
Great. We've got two questions. One for Amber. So hopefully, Amber, you should be able to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Woo! Amazing. Absolutely super interesting. Thank you very much. The first thing that I wanted to pass a comment on, only because I do a lot of work in the marine conservation space, is, yeah, okay, you can put the stuff underwater, but you are going to affect an ecosystem. There is an ecosystem down there. Now, of course, there are thermal vents and there are animals that love, and they will be attracted to that, but it will change the environment down there. And I know we have a lot of ocean, but we tend to kind of go overboard on these things, and we'll suddenly have 1 million of these things underwater, and that will change the ocean significantly. So just wanted to put that tiny caveat on the end of your comment of it won't affect the ocean. It will. Other than that, was actually more to do with the last little bit that you were talking about, as all these sort of white middle-aged males in Silicon Valley. They're also going to be the people already are the ones who are making all the money of this and other technologies. Are there great startups that we ought to be looking at and investing in? Because I don't want them just to make the money. I'm like, are there crowdfunding things that we can look at to get involved more in AI so that the rest of the world could actually benefit from it? I mean, when AI first started to come across my radar, I was sort of understood, oh, we're building this for the social good of the world, but nobody seems to be sharing any of the financial benefit with the growth of these enormous companies for the rest of the world, which I think probably would be a little bit fairer, but as we all know, the world's not terribly fair. Anyway, chucking that giant ball into the room. So, Dom, thank you for your time today.
Yes.
And I'll leave it there.
So I can try to answer that financial thing as best as I can, which is not going to be very well. The hard reality is that training these models is incredibly expensive. It's hundreds of millions to train one of these models, and there are very few organizations that have that. You're basically in the realm of large-scale multinationals and medium wealthy plus countries able to actually train something that is going to be meaningful. And within that, you've got an even tighter constraint that the number of AI researchers who are available to actually train these models, is in the low thousands in the whole world. That's the single biggest constraint, and it's the single biggest kind of monopoly point. Is not the access to compute or the access to capital, it's the access to researchers, and basically those researchers are all locked up at either OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, and there's not necessarily going to be a way to break that out. If you are looking for personal exposure to the kind of the benefits of AI, investing in any of the big tech companies is going to give you some kind of form of exposure to that. Nvidia is the classic one, although I will just caveat all this by saying this is not investment advice. And I personally, for myself, would not at the moment. I think that there is a not insignificant chance that everything is a bit overvalued as it stands, and there might be a correction. Again, not investment advice. I don't know. I'm just talking about what I would do personally. I think that the reality is, and I think this is the point of mobilization, if that makes sense, is that the only way that the value of these systems doesn't get captured by a small group of trillionaires is if government gets involved. There is nothing else that is going to do this, because the nature of these systems, where they have to be so large, and they are natural monopolies because of the way that they're built, the way that they work. What happens to natural monopolies? They're either turned into public institutions, or at least they are highly regulated. And if there is a point of mobilization, it needs to be about that. And I think that trouble for government is that they don't necessarily understand the technology very well. As a first thing,
two, with Mark Zuckerberg being interviewed.
Yeah, they do have to do some kind of work around the existential risk kind of questions. And three, they are scared to death that they are going to miss out on this opportunity, because at the heart of it, this is a geopolitical race. And if it's not done by the US, it'll be done by China. Europe is nowhere at the moment. It's a very, very distant third. And if you believe that AI ends up making up 20% of the global economy, whichever country gets there first is basically going to be the next global hegemon. And I think that every kind of state is looking at it through the lens of, oh man, do we want to be caught out by this? If we say to the AI labs, right, we're going to tax you really heavily, and they say, fine, well, we're not going to do any of our research in your country, then that's potentially a much worse outcome for the future than trying to kind of collect the money now. I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. It's just the thought process that people are going through.
And Susie's recommended womendefiningai.com, Amber, as well. Great. And I'm just going to, we're nearly at time, but I'm just going to unmute Emma. Do you have a comment? Maybe I can't unmute her. Oh, well, I'm trying to unmute Emma. Emma, does it let you unmute? Sadly not. Oh, no, here we go, Emma.
Yeah.
Oh,
Still on mute.
it's still on mute. Well, do you know what? We're nearly at time. So I just want
Otherwise, put it in the chat, Emma.
Yeah, maybe put it in the chat. But thank you so much, Tom. I learned so much today. And if anyone has any other questions, I'm sure they can drop Tom or Susie any questions directly.
Just tom@generalpurpose.com. Or if you want to get in touch with the team more generally, it's just hi@generalpurpose.com.
And yeah, thank you so much for your time. Great to see everyone. Take care.
Great. Thanks.
Bye.